Hi, fellow homeowners. I have Tim and Dennis with me here, and we're going to discuss asset management. It's a follow-up to our previous discussion about using a finance committee and getting a better handle on the many millions of dollars we have in assets in this community that have to really be managed carefully. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a presentation that we've put together in terms of how that might or how that should look, and hopefully give you some insight into how we look at asset management. And we're going to make a few comments about what this means. Hopefully, all the owners on looking at this can understand better, the asset management we're talking about. And Tim and Dennis will jump in here and there when it's appropriate to just give a few more comments. But we're going to attach this slide deck so you'll be able to look at it in your leisure. But in essence, we have a decent amount of assets. We have the clubhouse, the pool, the irrigation systems. There's a lot of assets that we have to manage. It's much more complex than just putting stuff on a spreadsheet. And the real issue is not so much do we have enough reserve money, but what does that mean? Are we managing our assets wisely so that they can last as long as possible and we get the best useful life we can? And so again, it's complex. Right now, I think all of us feel it's a reactive approach. We wait till things break, we defer things that shouldn't be deferred, and that cost us more money. And we want to get into a proactive approach. And the goal of maintenance programs is really to maximize the equipment reliability and lifespan, equipment, roads being everything, and optimize the cost, right? So, I mean, like Tim, Dennis, any thoughts at this point?
Hey, I would just like to draw a corollary to every resident's vehicle. If you're not changing the oil, your car is going to fail. If you change it regularly, your car is going to last a lot longer.
Hmm.
That's what we need to do. We need to have preventive maintenance throughout the community, making sure that the assets that we do have the longest life they can get before it's necessary to replace a worn out piece of equipment, not one that's damaged, but one that's worn out.
Right, right, exactly.
I'll take it from, I like Tim's example because you're doing it in something that, people can relate to, because everybody has a car, you should be changing oil. I'm going to
Hmm.
take it from the standpoint of maintenance of, let's say, the air conditioning systems.
Hmm.
Now, because they are, past expected useful life, if you look at them, the recommendations were these things need to be serviced to be looked at, twice a year instead of once a year.
Hmm.
I can tell you that looking at, some of the units, especially for where the ballroom is, it's hard to believe that anybody has really even looked at them, never mind check them to make sure they're functioning properly. I mean, there is insulation for all of those lines running from those units going into the building. That insulation is either shot, it's cracked, it's laying on the ground, there's debris, between all that stuff. And I can tell you, if I looked at it today and when I first looked at it, months ago, nothing's changed. I
Right.
mean, so
Well,
we've got a maintenance, I know we've got a maintenance contract, but is that maintenance contract just for fixing things? Or are we, you should be looking at testing the lines. Are the pressures right? is the thing functioning the way it's supposed to be, you should have records on all of those pieces of equipment. So when you come out the next time, you would be able to see if that unit is still functioning the way it was. I
Right.
don't believe we're doing that simply because of what I see.
Right. I've asked if we have written down, um, a true maintenance program. And as far as I know, I've never gotten a response that yes, here it is. And then the other part of that, as we've talked about, is this is where using proper software is valuable because for every component, you can put down that program into the software. You don't have to do it three times, do it on a separate spreadsheet, whatever. So as we've talked about, there's a lot of opportunity to
It's
change the
just
way we
like
approach.
at one point in time, because there's 16 units there, originally they were estimated to be like $6,000 a piece to replace.
Right,
3 years later, when you look at it, the estimates are, I mean, 6,000 a piece for 16 units. You need 96,000. Three
right,
years later, the smaller units, not the light commercial units, there's 11 of them, and the cost alone to replace those is now $100,000.
right,
The light commercial units is another $126,000.
right,
I
right.
mean, you've
The-
doubled the cost.
Right. The reason, as we've discussed before, you need the dynamic software. It's not
Yeah.
as simple as waiting every 3 years to do things. You've got to keep up with what's happening in the world, whether it's increases because of aluminum or because of whatever. We know prices have been skyrocketing. But
The
yeah, go
little
ahead.
known fact about most units, I don't care if it's, commercial or for your house, whatever efficiency rating it had when it was brand new, every roughly 4 to 5 years, you lose 1 point of that efficiency. So if it started out brand new at 12 and the unit's 16 years old, you're lucky if that thing's functioning at an 8 or a 9, which means it's running longer, it's running harder, and you are using a lot more electricity to keep it going.
Right. Well, let's go through a few more slides just to get our point across, and then I'll let you guys can comment a little more. But obviously, we're talking about prevention. We're talking about not waiting till things fail. Small fixes now prevent larger bills, and the analogy with cars is appropriate. You keep changing your oil, and you don't have to worry about a blown engine or something like much more expensive. And our goal would be to fewer surprise repairs and lower long-term costs, right?
Okay,
Um,
let's go
so,
back to one.
oh, go ahead. Where do you want to go?
Yeah. Better planning should also include quality of the equipment. We need to not just buy based on price,
Right,
but how much longer life can we get out of something that's costing maybe $500 to $5,000 more than what we've been doing?
right. Yeah, that's a great point. I think you don't cheap out on certain types of equipment that
Right.
you rely on. Just because it's a lower price, you really want to get value. A good price with high quality.
I mean, you can get it cheap, you can get it quick, but it's not going to be dependable.
Right,
I mean, it's the old three-legged stool, theory. If you
right,
want something that's quality and you're willing to pay for it, you may have to wait a while.
right,
Okay, but if you want a quick fix, you can get a quick fix. It
right,
ain't it's going to cost you a lot of money, but you're going to be right back at it,
right.
very shortly.
Right. And, again, just to reiterate how we feel it's complex. It's not just a spreadsheet thing. It's a lot of work, and you got to have the right tools to track everything and to know what the impact's going to be. And that's where we want to head. And I think it's really important, and you guys can comment on this if you want, but right now we have this, I'll call it a slush fund, but I mean, maybe that's not the appropriate term, but it's
It
basically
is.
money put aside for supposedly deferred maintenance. But that's not the right approach. The approach should be you have uh, a pool of money for assets, and that's what you use. You don't need a separate fund. You really need to stop the unnecessary repairs because you don't have preventative maintenance. But go ahead, Dennis or Tim.
Yeah, and I mean, we won't get into it obviously, but like I think I mentioned to you, the units that sit uh, left of where the pool bathrooms are and where the gym is, you've got 5 or 6 units, surrounded by a 4 foot tall vinyl fence.
Right.
Well, over the last 16 years, you've also got shrubbery that's as high, if not higher than that fence, that comes out another 2 feet. So the ease of getting a unit out of there isn't a simple matter of removing a panel of fencing, because now you've got this 4 foot hedge that runs all the way around it. And then they added more landscaping in the middle. So it's almost like, how much landscaping do you have to rip out in order just to be able to remove a unit?
Right. Right.
And that's not
On this
factored into.
last slide, let's be clear. How can you argue against reserve funds? You can't. There's got to be a reserve. But that
Right.
reserve needs to have a counterpart, which is daily. We need to have funds that are available for the day-to-day operations of Heritage Hills. If that means cutting off a little bit of the fat that's in the heritage or in the reserve funds to make sure that we have the day-to-day stuff covered, then that's really what we need to do.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, if you look at this slide, we believe in better planning, much more owner involvement. We need that committee. We need probably a small, potentially another group that's going to review the reserve study itself, and people who are familiar, like Dennis is, with a lot of the equipment and such. So, there's a lot to be done, a lot more than's been done.
Right. And I mean, and then you've got what I call the surprise maintenance. And of course, we know what that is, especially with that, with those tennis courts. I
Yeah.
mean, less than 2 years ago, they were done. You know, they look like crap, not because of the job that was done, but, almost like your roads. The amount of cracks, across the entire width of those courts, that's not an easy fix. You just can't, put a patch over the top of it and repaint it, because the problem is not the surface. Once again, the problem is underneath that surface. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, right now, I don't even know what the solution is, because those courts aren't scheduled to be rebuilt. And I do mean rebuilt for another 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
They're not going to last that long.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a perfect example of a proper analysis, right? If it costs you 5 or 6 thousand a year to patch versus just doing it correctly, is that worth it? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but nobody that I know of has done a true analysis to look at
And,
that.
and I don't want to get into the management function, especially in a recording or anything. But the other part of that problem is, I mean, you don't have to be, as well versed or have all of the experience that I have for an on-site manager to be able to recognize this stuff.
And
You
help.
don't have to know everything. You
Right.
have to at least be willing to understand what you don't know and where you can get the help that you need.
Yeah, I think we agree that the real issue is you've got to have a curious mind, be know when to ask for help. And I think this is where it's not a person blame thing, but if you became new board members, I think you both agree, you need more involvement. It's not as simple as sitting back and expecting things to happen. That's not going to happen, right? You have to get involved. You have to get more involved in the operations side because that's
And
where the rubber hits the road.
You
There's a
know,
position on the finance committee.
five
Do,
people.
do we need a finance committee? Maybe not. Maybe we can do things on our own. But with a finance committee, we can probably do things better,
Yeah.
which means protecting your investments, and protecting the Heritage Hills community.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Tim and Dennis, for that interesting discussion on asset management. Hopefully, the owners that were watching this found it helpful. It's a complex issue. There's a lot of work to be done. And in our opinion, we're not doing it. And we need people like Tim and Dennis on the board so we can get this moving. Thanks.